This is the story of one of the strangest ideas the early automobile age ever produced. A device bolted to the front of a car that was built not to avoid hitting a pedestrian, but to catch one. Picture a scoop, or a net, meant to sweep a person up off the street before they slid under the wheels. Over the next few minutes, we'll dig into what these pedestrian catchers actually were, the real crisis that convinced grown engineers they were a good idea, the reasons they never caught on, and the tall tales the internet has since stacked on top of the true story. Let's begin with the problem these contraptions were chasing, because it was frighteningly real. Cars poured into American cities during the 1920s faster than anyone knew how to handle, and the death toll rose right along with them. According to the historian Peter Norton, who wrote the definitive book on this era, American traffic fatalities reached around 16,000 in 1923, and by 1930, that figure had nearly doubled to roughly 30,000 people killed every single year. Here's the part that stops you cold, though, because most of the dead weren't drivers at all. They were pedestrians. Going by 1928 figures out of Philadelphia, roughly 3/4 of the people struck by cars were on foot, and a shocking share of them were young children, many between the ages of about 4 and 8. Sit with that for a second. 30,000 deaths a year, in an age when the automobile still counted as brand new, and most of the victims were simply trying to cross the street. Cities boiled over about what the newspapers of the day branded the slaughter on the streets, and into that panic stepped inventors clutching an idea so literal it almost sounds like a joke. If cars were going to strike people anyway, then maybe the car itself could be engineered to catch them. This concept, though, didn't spring out of nowhere. Long before the automobile, electric trams and streetcars already carried something in the same spirit. Low front-mounted devices known as fenders or lifeguards that swept a fallen person clear of the wheels rather than letting them get dragged beneath. That tramway safety history arrived first, which meant the car inventors essentially lifted the idea and strapped it to the nose of an automobile. I'll be upfront with you, because the finer details of those early tram fenders, including the names attached to them, are exactly the sort of thing I'd want to confirm in the transport archives before stating as gospel, so treat them as background rather than hard fact. What we can document, thanks to the British Pathé newsreel archive, are 2 genuine attempts to bolt a catcher onto a car. Germany gives us the first, a 1927 trial of a protective net mounted on the front of an automobile. The thinking ran that instead of a rigid bumper knocking a person flat, the net would cradle them. It was a real trial, captured on film, and it stands as the earliest solid example we've got. The more famous attempt rolled out in 1939, in Sheffield, England, where 2 local engineers showed off a folding metal scoop for the front of a car. British Pathé's own description called it a scooping invention that could bolt onto the bumpers or replace them outright, folding neatly away whenever it wasn't wanted. Listen to how the newsreel introduced it, because the tone is one you would absolutely never hear today. That scoop, the narrator announced, folds neatly away when it isn't eating pedestrians, before adding that when the scoop sits open, a jaywalker simply can't get run over, and sometimes that's more than he deserves. That single line tells you something worth pausing on. The gag buried in that narration. The notion that a jaywalker gets what he deserves wasn't a throwaway. It mirrored an enormous shift in how society had come to picture who the streets actually belonged to. And that shift is the real reason gadgets like the scoop were always destined to be a footnote. Here's what genuinely happened. Confronted with all those deaths, the automobile industry never did solve the problem by catching pedestrians, and instead, it rewrote the rules of the street itself. Peter Norton documents how the auto interests of the day, a bloc that literally called itself motordom, worked to recast the street as a place for vehicles and to shove the blame for accidents off the car and onto the person on foot. Their tool of choice was a brand new idea, one we now repeat without thinking. And that idea was jaywalking. The word itself landed as an insult. Calling someone a jay meant branding them an ignorant country hick who didn't know how to carry himself in the city. First appearing in a dictionary in 1924, the term jaywalker spread astonishingly fast. Norton describes how auto clubs and outfits like the American Automobile Association drove the message into schools and onto street corners. And Boy Scouts were even enlisted to hand out cards spelling out what jaywalking meant. By 1928, the AAA reigned as the leading supplier of school safety materials in the entire country, drilling a generation of children on one blunt lesson: that the street belongs to automobiles, and if you get struck crossing it wrong, the fault is yours. Think about how thoroughly that campaign worked. Before the car arrived, the street counted as shared ground, and the motorist ranked as the dangerous intruder, above all where children were concerned. Within a handful of years, that whole understanding flipped, and the pedestrian became the one in the wrong. Norton even points out that when the word jaywalker first surfaced, the New York Times ran an editorial condemning it as far too insulting for polite or official use. That is how loaded the term landed at the time, and today it rolls off the tongue without a flicker of hesitation. Once you grasp that, the fate of the pedestrian catcher snaps into focus. No car maker was going to spend real money bolting an elaborate scoop onto every vehicle to catch pedestrians, when the far cheaper fix was to simply declare that pedestrians had no business in the road to begin with. The catcher offered a mechanical answer to a problem the industry chose to settle with words and laws instead. Layer on the plain physical reality that snaring a human body with a scoop at any real speed was impractical and unlikely to work, and the whole thing never advancing past the newsreel stage starts to make perfect sense. That 1927 net amounted to a trial. The Sheffield scoop of 1939 stayed a prototype. 2 engineers demonstrated for the cameras. Neither one ever reached mass production, and no evidence exists that any car-mounted pedestrian catcher entered regular service. This is exactly the kind of story that goes viral, which means I need to separate what's real from what the internet has dreamed up, because there's plenty of the second kind. Videos float around out there claiming a specific patent covered these devices, and they'll flash an official-looking patent number to prove it. That number is fabricated, and it isn't even formatted like a genuine patent from the period. While their claims pile on from there, insisting that car makers like Ford or Buick or Studebaker built bumpers fitted with spikes or ejector seats, or that a commissioner in Milwaukee ordered 18-inch chrome ejection spikes onto cars back in 1933. None of that holds up. Every bit of it traces to an AI-narrated satire video and amounts to pure invention, because there were no spiked bumpers, no ejector seats, and certainly no seat belts for a pedestrian riding along on the hood. One more caution belongs here, because this audience cares about getting it right. Even the authentic footage takes a beating online. That real 1927 German net trial tends to circulate today in colorized, dramatized cuts, with the date sometimes sliding into the 1930s to fit a punchier headline. The underlying event actually happened, yet the shiny, reposted clips have often been doctored, and when one of them crosses your feed, the thing to trust is the original archive record rather than the viral repackaging. Where does all of this leave the pedestrian catcher in the larger story of the automobile? It stands as a well-meaning dead end, a snapshot of a moment when the car was new, the death toll was real and horrifying, and nobody had landed on the right answer yet. Some people reached for a scoop on the front of the car, while the industry reached for a change in the law. Worth remembering, too, is that real, lasting protection for pedestrians didn't arrive until decades later. Not until 2012 did Volvo introduce the world's first pedestrian airbag on the V40, unveiled at the Geneva Motor Show, a system that senses an impact, lifts the rear of the hood, and cushions the person against the base of the windshield. That represents the modern descendant of the very instinct those 1930s inventors were chasing, and the difference is that it actually works. Which is the only reason I raise it, so you never confuse that genuine modern engineering with the folding scoops of the newsreel age. The pedestrian catcher never saved a single life that anyone can document. What it offers instead is a real window into a strange and desperate chapter of automotive history, back when the machine was outrunning the rules and clever people were willing to try just about anything. If you'd never heard of the safety scoop before tonight, or if you carry a story of your own about the odd safety ideas of the old days, tell me about it down in the comments. Stick around too, because a whole world of forgotten automotive ideas just like this one is still waiting to be remembered.